Here tonight. I know this is your Tuesday off, and I promise this won't take too long, but I felt like it was really important to give Alfred, and especially the election board chair appointment, its own special meeting to make sure that we dedicate the time that it needs to it, and make a wise decision in who we're going to appoint to run the elections. So yeah, we can just get right into the meeting. I call this meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. And we'll start with the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any amendments?
I motion to approve the agenda for September 15th.
I second.
Awesome. Justin motions, Zuleika seconds, and I just realized I don't have the thing to count. Hold on 1 second. No. Okay, I know what I'll do. Okay, I'll do roll call vote. IVP?
Yes.
EVP?
Yes.
Gen Rep 1?
Yes.
Gen Rep 2?
Yes.
Gen Rep 3?
Yes.
AC's not here. CEC, CSC's not here. CAC's not here. FAC is here? Oh, technically no. Okay.
Yeah, I'm proxying for Sachi.
Okay. FSC?
Yes.
SWC?
Yes.
Okay. TSR?
Yes.
ISR?
Yes.
Cool. By a vote of 9-0, the motion passes and the agenda is approved for tonight. Just to remind all of the proxies here, you all can engage in discussions. Unfortunately, you all just can't vote. So that's why I'm not counting you, in case you were wondering. And next we have approval of the minutes. So I assume this is from the minutes from last week, which was September 8th.
I motion to approve the minutes of September 8th, 2020.
Second.
Do like a motion.
Wait. Are they out?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I don't think she sent them
Yeah.
yet.
Are you sure?
Let me
Ones.
look.
I was looking at the wrong date.
I don't think she did.
She didn't.
Okay. So then we will move on from that item since there's no minutes to approve, and we'll just move right into public comment. I don't think anyone's here for public comment, but I'm just going to give the spiel anyways. Public comment is the opportunity for folks to be able to speak to council. You have under 2 minutes to be able to deliver any remarks to council. Please use gender inclusive language, attack the idea, not the person, and remember, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from accountability. So if anyone would like to get public comment, please use the raise hand feature and I can call on you. Quinn, I was wrong.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Quinn O'Connor, and today I am a representative of the Disabled Student Union. Most of you probably know me as also in fact, but right now I'm separate from that. But I'm basically commenting on behalf of disabled student unions and our access to voting in next year's USAC elections. As council approves this year's election board chair, I urge you all to consider and ask this appointment how they will make voting accessible to disabled students and the concrete steps they will take to include my population in the USAC elections. I don't know if all of you know this or not, but last year, a blind student was not able to cast their vote in the elections due to the website being inaccessible to a screen reader. Nothing against the past election board chair. It was more of an admin thing, but accessibility cannot be an afterthought. in planning, and this new election board chair must work with administration to bring these issues to light before like the week of elections and everything, because this is really unacceptable and actively disenfranchises disabled students, and we absolutely cannot bar them from participating in voting in campus elections, especially in right now is an election year, for instance. And I feel like college students who can't even vote or feel very discouraged from voting in their own college's election or university's election will further discourage them from voting in their own country's election due to a lack of that inclusion and accessibility. And I think voting, especially this year, is very important just for all young people to do so. So please take the needs of our population to heart when appointing this position, and thank you for your time and for having this meeting today.
Thank you, Quinn, for those very important comments. Will anyone else from the public like to give public comment? Okay, seeing as there's no one else, we will adjourn public comment at 5:08 p.m. And now moving on to our only item on the night. So Alfred's appointment to the election board as chair. So we'll start off, as y'all know, or Alfred, I guess this is just more for you, 1 minute intro, and then we'll go into 10-minute Q&A from on the side of council. It can be extended if they wish to extend it. And then after that, council will receive ARC's recommendation, a deliberation, and then you will find out whether or not you receive the position. So I actually would want Lalo, since Lalo's here, to be able to introduce Alfred before he goes on and introduces himself.
Cool. Thanks, Naomi. Hey, y'all. So just a quick intro for Alfred. So he was previously the investigations director of the elections board last year. And we thought a lot of his remarks and comments that he made in regards to last year's election and things can be improved really stood out, as well as him having new ideas on how to like engage students and ensure that students that don't traditionally run in and vote in USAC elections do so in this upcoming year. So with that, I'll hand it off to Alfred.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Lalo. Good evening, council members. My name is Tet Linton, but I mainly go by as Alfred. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a first-generation international student, a rising senior pursuing a double major in political science and economics. A little bit about my background. I was born in Burma, a third world country in Southeast Asia, ridden with poverty and inequality. At UCLA, I came to the elections board last year, hoping to amplify the voices of those underrepresented on campus. And also, I hope to contribute towards upholding the integrity of USAC elections. I love being on the elections board because I really do hope to make USAC elections more accessible for students and to have my actions contribute to a future in which the disconnect between the student body and USAC elections is much less drastic. That being said, I hope to have a great and friendly conversation with all of you tonight in this hot seat, answering questions about my potential appointment as elections board chair.
Thank you. Hot seat it is. So if any council members have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll get started. Aiden?
Yeah, thanks so much. I have two questions. Should I split them up or and do one later or do both now, Naomi?
You can just do both now.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Alfred. Really appreciate you coming and speaking with us here tonight. First question I had was, I'm really grateful for your work on last year's election and transitioning the process online in what was a very difficult year. Kind of wondering, since you'll be coming back to this role for what perhaps could be another online election in the spring, what do you think went well from the transition to online for the election last year that you hope to replicate again this year, and what do you think can be improved?
Yeah, for sure. Last year, what happened was 80% of the elections was basically online. So in that transition, I guess the transition was basically when the candidate application periods were over, and when that finished, the entire election essentially became online. And I think what we did really well during this transition period was that we introduced alternative arrangements for candidates who campaign. We introduced the candidate application, candidate statements, which we posted on our website. We also tried to explore in different avenues to allow candidates and just referendum leaders to promote their ideas on like to the student body, and which we achieved this through the Daily Bruin. We also, I think we, during this, especially during this online year, we definitely tried our best to simplify the election process to all of you guys, all of the candidates, to make sure that all of you had the necessary tools to navigate the online election. But I do think what we could have done, definitely, we could have done better, was that I think we could have definitely done more outreach, especially because I think the outreach this year, especially in the transition period, what appeared to be the case for me was I felt like the outreach, the makeup of the candidates that was applying to be on USAC offices, I think that they were very skewed towards North Campus majors. So I think definitely one thing that we could improve during this transition is to increase more engagements more uniformly, and especially towards groups that have shown less engagement. I think this is one thing that we could improve on. And the second thing definitely that I think we could improve on is, because last year it was very tumultuous, we had to figure things out on the go. I think this year, something that can definitely be better is more organization just of the election board and the online election process. Because I felt like last year, you know, like when everything just became snap online, we had to quickly develop alternative measures. And I think being more prepared this year to make sure that candidates are able to get what they need on time faster, and they're in the loop more ahead in time. I think that will be very useful for the next year.
Perfect. And then my other question is, so I mean, observing elections, USAC elections in the past, it seems like you know, a certain pain point that has come up year after year is kind of the relationship between council and the election board. And you know, on principle, I'm a big supporter of an independent election board. So you know, with that in mind, what do you foresee ideally the relationship between you know, your board and council looking like, where you feel comfortable that you're running an independent, fair election?
Oh yeah, this definitely came up as one of my questions to in both the ARC and to Lalo. I definitely was very sad to see the relationship between council and the e-board just, you know, turning into to garbage every year because the relationships between, I guess like it was mostly because council during that time they were not too sure about the election board chair's like discretion and ability to lead the board. And what that happened was, I think, an incessant amount of micromanaging and just a lot of like clashing with the election board. And I think definitely I really do hope to have a great and working relationship with every one of you. And what I really want to do to ensure that is I plan to be transparent to all of you by one, like I plan to give regular updates about the election board's work through special presentation or through public comment to everyone. I'm still deciding on whether it will be as frequent as Navi visiting you guys every week. But apart from that, I really do want to increase the transparency between the e-board and the council. And I also plan to establish a communication channel with Naomi to make sure that I can give her the appropriate information as requested to make sure that e-board and council are more on the same page. And I think just, and I think lastly, I think I would foresee a great relationship between all of you, everyone here, because I think the best thing to have a great relationship is to be transparent and to work together and to understand each other's sides. Aiden, like I think that was the first part of your question, right? Your second part was?
I think that only had one part, so you perfectly answered it, but thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Zuleika?
Yeah. Hi, Alfred. Thank you so much for joining us. So my question is, last year, Navi, at the beginning of the election, Navi he outreached to different groups. And I know that he came to the TLC to outreach to transfer students as well. But during his speech, he sort of, and I'm pretty sure this is not intentional, but he sort of said, all of you can run for transfer student rep, which is great. But my goal is for transfers to have the opportunity to run for any position that they would like on council. So I'm wondering, and you did speak upon outreach. I'm wondering, what would you do to outreach to more transfers and make them more aware that these positions are available for them and that they're not just stuck to one position on council?
Yeah, definitely, Zuleika. I think the main thing that we need to work on, just so that transfer students are more in the loop about the student government, is to raise more awareness about the positions themselves. Because I think what often happens with election board chairs is, like when they see TSR, like they just immediately associate a lot of like transfer students with the TSR. And I think just treating whenever and I do plan to try to do some collaboration projects with you. And if I do that, I think in the special presentations, the best thing to go for it is not to just be like, oh, hey, this is the TSR, you can apply for this, but, oh, hey, these are these other offices and these are what their functions are. And if you're interested for them, you should apply for them. I think just engaging more with the transfer student community is very important. I think that this would be a very great way to keep more students in the USAC loop.
Cool. Bacher?
Hi, so I do have like a few questions. So I'm gonna start with the first one, which is, so like until now, and I think even during fall, none of us would really know how will like spring be. Like, is it gonna be like fully on campus? Is it gonna be like hybrid, or is it gonna be like online? So we don't really know much of the situation come like in spring, and we don't want to be like, as you said, in like last year, in the situation where you improve on the spot. So what are your plans to basically accommodate the many possible scenarios in terms of like students being on campus or partially on campus or online? So like, what do you have like any vision, like different plans, and like how will you tackle this? You're muted.
My bad. Yeah, definitely Buckler. So I think last year, what the version that we had was, an 100% online election. So I think if the scenario were to come to an 100% online election at the voting week, then I think one thing we could I think we can just continue doing the same things that we did this year. But I'm still thinking if it became more hybrid, right, when students are allowed to return on campus, I'm still thinking about the possibility of implementing polling stations, because I think the possibility of polling stations was something Navi really wanted to do last year, and I think this was something that we were actually like trying to figure out. And I think polling stations would be a great way to increase engagement with students on campus during a hybrid year. But again, with a polling station, there also comes the cost of maintaining the polling station and just how many students are expected to be on campus. So I think if it had to do it a more like a 20% in-person classes, then polling stations would definitely be something that I want to implement. But if it's more like 8% online, 8% in-person classes, then I think it would be ideal for the election board to continue doing online outreach.
Okay, to add in on that question, so you talked about like like the voting process itself, but like what about the campaign period? So like what are your thoughts on that? So like, because we already have like online infrastructure to like for voting already, so that is not the issue, but the issue is like with what happens before the voting itself. Do you have any like thoughts on that?
Bakar, do you mean like, do I have any thoughts for how I plan for candidates to differently manage their campaigns in different scenarios? Is that what you?
Not completely, but okay. Rephrasing the question. So, okay. So during the like before the voting process, so like starting from like candidacy to like campaigns and etc. So that like, what are you like your thoughts on accommodating like the different possible scenarios that the campus will like be having um, in that area itself. So it's not, I'm not talking about like the voting process. I'm talking everything before that.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think from the way I see it, I the way I see it, I think what's the most important here is to make sure that candidates are given the necessary documents and guidelines to make sure that they're able to navigate their campaigns. And I think just if you're talking about more like to navigate the campaign, and I think what we would be doing is basically on the similar line, because what we did last year was we really tried to like take the entire election code, we tried to break it down, and we made the process much more simple for candidates to follow their candidacy. And I think regardless of whether your elections and campaigns are online, regardless of whether they're in person, I think making sure that everyone knows what is going on and how to manage their candidacy is independent of whether it's online or it's not, um, because I think that like by giving candidates the same set of simplified documents, the same set of clear instructions on how to navigate their campaigns, I think that able to um, they will be able to thrive in their campaigns, if that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, my next question. So it involves international students, both in terms of like um, okay. So what are your thoughts like and possible plans in involving international students, both in terms of like being candidates and also in the sense of voting? Because as you know, like until like international students, especially incoming, let's say incoming freshmen and transfer international students, have not been on campus yet, and there might be a possibility that they will not be on campus even for the like upcoming period. So how do you plan to engage that population and encourage them to be candidates or like to vote and etc.?
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that one is definitely an easy question. So international students are all in the loop through the DashU Center, and we already had some sort of engagement with the DashU Center last year to engage international students. But then, like, I don't think that, last year we made that much of an effort to engage with DashU. But this year, I know that, you know, like being an international student myself, a lot of my underclassmen, they're all stuck overseas and they can really come to campus. So I think to make up for this lack of engagement with campus, if we can collaborate better with the student affair of DashU Center, I think we can work on info sessions about USAC. We can talk about how the students can get involved, and we can collaborate on some special presentations that I will be happy to work with you. I think in that, because the DashU Center has basically the listserv of every single international student, I think this would be the perfect opportunity to basically educate them about USAC and its functions.
Okay, I think those are my questions for now. I'm just gonna like leave some space for others.
Wait, what'd you say at the end, Bakr? You muted.
Oh no, I was saying that I'm giving like space for others to ask questions.
Okay. Yeah, if you have any more, just feel free to raise your hand again. We're here all night. Well, hopefully not. So we'll go Justin, myself, Noe, and then Katie.
Hey Alfred, thanks for coming out. So I had two questions. First one being, as you were on being on the e-board, there was kind of like a last minute, I guess like town hall regarding the Cub referendum. And it was kind of due to like the things covered on Reddit before, and a lot of people's feelings about the referendum. It was kind of held to a scrutiny that typically like referendums hadn't been held to before. And I was wondering what was your plan for kind of dealing with basically how to handle referendums moving forward. I guess the two options or kind of two ways would be like having more of like town halls and things for like as in people had to answer to certain things, or having less of that and holding referendum to a lesser standard. Does that kind of make sense?
So I kind of lost you at your
That last part?
Yeah.
Okay, let's forget about that last part. Just answer to what you understood.
Yeah, so I think if you're talking about protect, do you? I guess like my question, my clarification question is, do you mean about protecting candidates or do you mean about protecting referenda?
I mean about specifically referenda and how you plan to treat them, kind of moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. So I think referenda. I think last year what we did was we provided the referenda leaders a platform on Daily Bruin, and we also provided them a platform on our website to advertise and promote their ideas. I think that definitely raised a lot of more engagement with the student community about referendas, and I understand that the amount of attacks that the CUP referenda got last year was unprecedented, and the election board did do a lot in its power and everything that we could to protect everyone. But I do think that with respect to your town hall idea, I think more town halls would be a good idea because as referendum leaders, it's important for the referendum leaders to promote their ideas to engage with the student community. So I don't think town halls are a bad idea at all. And I think that last year we only provided two means for referenda leaders to, engage with the student body. And I think the next year, I think adding one extra official election board sponsored event for referendas, one election board sponsored event for we didn't get to do meet the candidates last year, so I think trying to have a online event in substitute for meet the candidates, meet the referenda, and just maybe one more official town hall after candidate debates. I think that would be a good idea to engage with the student body about candidate ideas and about referenda ideas. If that is what answers your question.
No, that definitely does. No, clear opinion. Thank you. Yeah. My second question was just uplifting Quinn's question earlier in public comment. How you plan to make accessibility a priority, and especially with the reality that someone was kind of disenfranchised by the elections platform not being accessible to screen readers, things like that.
Yeah, like for that particular one, that was just brought to my attention in public comment. Actually, I was I was not aware of that. I think that probably happened. That happened with like IT issues during like the voting week itself. So I think that time when I was very just flooded with investigations and complaints, I didn't learn about them. But that being said, expanding accessibility of USAC elections is incredibly important to me, especially during an online year when candidacy, gathering enough signatures for your candidacy is already much more difficult. So I think that, especially about the disability part, if I were to be the election board chair, I would definitely have to have a conversation with IT and with the UCLA administration to figure out, like what are ways that we can do, what are manageable ways that we can do to make sure that disabled students, like they are able to access the website. I think that's a conversation that I need to have with UCLA administration to make sure that we could provide, at the very least, an alternative.
Awesome. So I'll ask my question next, and then in our queue we have Noe, Katie, and then Bacher. So I think a lot of people know that I went through, I would say, a lot during the election season, and had instances of people impersonating me, people saying heinous things about myself, and then also Robert, who was the former USAC president. And, I think election board did a lot, but I also think that kind of toxicity deters people, especially students of color, from running, and especially, women from running too. So how do you plan to address a highly toxic, I guess, culture of USAC elections, and making them so that students like myself can feel more safe.
Yeah, like for that one, that was a very tough issue for the election board last year, because we did try, like everything, and as frustrating as we could, to do what we could to protect the candidates. But I think, like, in regards to your question, I will do everything in my power to make sure to work with administration to make sure that any student who violates the code of conduct is held responsible. Like, another thing I plan to do is to make it very clear to the public that comments like this is not tolerated. And another thing is to work with moderators of anonymous communities to address this heightened occurrence of racism and just unprecedented attacks against candidates during the election season. And I think the last thing is to always take suggestions from candidates, to always to be there to listen about their needs, and always to provide support for them. Because like, as regards to what we can do to protect candidates from anonymous attacks, that becomes a very difficult question, because we are unable to see the pictures and the names of anyone, and we're not able to hold them responsible. But I think engaging with moderators would help moderate this online environment. Last year, we actually tried to talk to the UCLA Reddit moderators to make sure, like, they were aware of this going on in their subreddit. But maybe because we actually reached out to them when it was actually happening and we didn't anticipate this, the moderators didn't seem very receptive to us. They kind of ignored us. I think from the next year, I think if I maybe start the conversation early on with them, maybe they will be more eager to help us monitor the online elections environment. But that being said, I will do everything in my power to make sure that I can do whatever on my end of the election board to hold anyone who doesn't contribute to a safe election climate responsible.
Thank you. And then my last question wasn't really a question, but it was more so kind of some food for thought. I think at the rate we're at right now, it'd be very hard to imagine a scenario where we would allow polling stations to be up because of, like, LA's like obviously gone to shit in a lot of ways. So and our government has failed in tremendous ways as well. So I don't see that being a thing that can happen. But I also just wanted to say, if in the event it could happen, the university has committed to providing an online option for students who cannot be here throughout the year. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind, that because there is going to be a significant portion of students who just won't be present in the Westwood area, we want to make sure we're not giving anyone an unfair advantage. And then I also kind of just wanted to raise a concern that I had with polling stations last year. I think there was an idea to check people's Bruin cards, and I was opposed to something of that nature because it can bring up instances of racial bias where students who, like myself, I look very different sometimes when I'm wearing my braids versus when I have my hair like this. And I wouldn't want anyone to be subject to any kind of discrimination. So I think if in the future, if this is going to be something that you're going to continue to pursue, really thinking of how we can make polling stations equitable, because there's a long history of voter suppression that exists in many different areas. And yeah, just, I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but that was kind of just like some thoughts that I wanted to share.
For your food for thought, I think for the polling stations, I was more thinking of it on the lines of, providing more means for students to be able to vote on campus. But I definitely see, like, how, like, prioritizing campus too much would just would give 80% of other students, like, all over the world, like, less of an opportunity. And that's definitely something that I would think of. But I do see your point. I was thinking more on the point of giving more opportunities for students to vote. But for the disenfranchisement thing of the, like, voter IDs and stuff, I think that's definitely an issue that I thought of with too when I was talking about this with Navi, because in a way I do feel like, the UCLA, like my UCLA system, like is a very secure, it's a very secure way for students to cast their votes. But with that added layer of the Bruin ID, I do agree with you that there is a chance that the whoever administering the polls would say like, okay, this is not you. So I think to work around this, maybe submitting like registration list of those who want to vote on the polls. I think that could be something that that I could explore with afterwards. But I haven't thought of that just yet.
Cool. Thank you. So Noe?
Hi, Alfred. Thank you for being here. My question was similar in regards to Reddit. Because they were kind of the moderators of the UCLA subreddit were not receptive to working with you all last year. If your plans to talk with them and see if they can help you in moderating this don't work, what are your plans to continually ensure a safe environment for candidates? Because if they weren't really receptive last year, there is a possibility that they won't be receptive again this year.
Okay. I think with regards to just like an online anonymous event, anonymous forum, it's very difficult for like the election board to hold people accountable on these forums. So I think like honestly, still the best way for us to moderate these anonymous forums is to engage with the moderators to make sure that they're being aware. Because like to be honest, if the moderators and like whoever administering the sites, if they're not open to engagement, then it's very hard for the elections board to, like hold anyone accountable on these forums, because there isn't much we can do when we don't know anyone who's doing these things. So I think in that case, then it would be through the other three means that I said, to make it very clear to the public that comments like this are not supported, and to make sure that they are toning down their attacks and their incidents of racism, and just to be there to always provide support for candidates. Because I am very frustrated, just like you, that these attacks are occurring. But if the moderators of these forums are not willing to engage with us, then it's very hard, to interfere with free speech in these communities, because we don't really have any control over them if we don't engage with the moderators. And as a side note, Navi is here. This is very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Was that good, Noe? Okay. Hey, Navi, we're glad to have you here.
Hi.
Cool. So we'll move on to the next question. Katie?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to go back to the Disabled Students Union and what they were talking about earlier. I know you were discussing how to vote and make that more of an opportunity, but what would you do to reach out to the disabled population at UCLA during the voting season?
I think reaching out to the disabled student population during the voting week would just be the same as reaching out to student organizations in general. I think it's important to during the voting week to make sure that we conduct outreach towards many student organizations. We send out emails to make sure that all students are in the loop. So I think just making sure that disabled students are aware of elections is just through the same means as anyone else, because through outreach towards their communities, through outreach towards their organizations, I do believe that we can get out the word to tell them that there are USAC elections. And I think especially working with FAC for disabled students is something that I plan to work with too, because FAC is in the loop with many disabled student organizations. And I think I think just doing more outreach with them would be the best means to navigate an online election.
Awesome. Bacher?
Hi again. Okay. My sound is going. What possible or potential issues do you foresee coming this year in terms of like the elections? Yeah, that is my first question. I do have like another question, but this is the first one.
Definitely. I think one procedural issue that I would definitely see happening in the next year is getting the number of required signatures for candidates to pursue their candidacies. So what happened the last year was normally the candidate application packets requires 100 signatures to be eligible for candidacy. But during the last year, Navi was temporarily empowered by council to change regulations around this. And I think we lowered the signatures down to like a certain amount where it was more manageable. And I think I definitely see signatures coming up as a procedural roadblock just because of this. So I think that one of the potential election code changes that I was thinking of was to change the amount of signature threshold just to make it so that USAC elections are still accessible during an online election, because it is just significantly harder for students to go around, classrooms gathering signatures when they don't have the personal interaction. So I think that's definitely one huge procedural roadblock I see for candidacy.
Okay, just like thought on this, then I will go to the next question. Um, like, did you consider like an online option? Because honestly, um, even like for fall, it's like less than 8% of classes are like in person. I wouldn't know about winter, but like I don't think many students will not be like in Westwood itself. So I don't think even like if you lower the threshold to whatever number it is, you wouldn't be solving the issue of students being actually on campus and candidates being on campus. So you might like want to start planning for like doing it online possibly. My last question is that, and this is like I just let's say as like an imaginative scenario. So like theoretically, some people might say that um, freshmen like or like incoming international students, including freshmen and transfers, who have not been on campus or set foot on campus, don't have the right to be candidates or to vote or etc. Uh, because like they don't know anything about the campus, they're not involved, etc. Whatever reasons those people might say. What is your opinion on this? And if something like this happens, because like seeing what happened last year, like election like season, I can foresee some of this toxicity towards international students. So, what are your thoughts regarding this, and how
But
will you combat it?
yeah, Bakar, could you repeat that part about candidates becoming not able to go to, like, not be able to become a candidate because they don't know anything about the campus, that part?
Oh, I could see some people arguing that international students who have not set foot on campus for any reason, especially like not being able to come to the US, don't really have the right to like be candidates or vote or anything because they haven't camp like not as involved or like have not been involved on campus. So like, how will you like tackle some of these like uh, like weird thoughts? I would say, but yeah, it's possible to happen.
I would love to answer your question, but I don't know if it's just me, but I'm getting a lot of cuts from you, a lot of feedback cuts, and I it's like you're.
Okay, I'll try to harness my voice as much as I can. Uh, okay, can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so what I was saying is that um okay there might be like some people saying during like election season that incoming international students who have not set foot on campus for like many reasons, including not being able to come to the US, don't really have the right to be candidates or vote just because they don't know how campus is run and like how things are happening on campus, etc. I hope that you heard this because like I don't think I have much voice to repeat it a fourth time.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I definitely understand you now.
Okay.
Well, it is the election board chair's like duty to make sure that we administer a fair and open election. So it's definitely not allowed. Like you can't. you can't just disenfranchise a student from candidacy just because they haven't been on campus, because all students are given an equal and open opportunity to run for office. So if I were to be the election board chair, I would make sure that students, even if they're miles and miles away, and even if they haven't experienced UCLA in their first year, they're still allowed to run for these offices, because as a UCLA student, it's their privilege. And I really hope your sore throat is getting better.
Awesome. Also, Bacher, if you like have a sore throat, you can also just feel free to message the questions too, and we can ask them. So that way we don't have those connection problems. But great. So next we have Christina, Aiden, Emily, and then Jong.
Hi, Alfred. First of all, thank you for being here today and for answering our questions. This one might be kind of a tough question because it is a tough situation. But okay, so as election board chair, it's important for you to have a strong relationship with USAC, obviously, to encourage applications and to like keep communication. But it's also really important for you to be independent and to maintain your integrity and to kind of be willing to enforce rules that might end up going against council members who you're working with. So I guess just what are your thoughts on that? And then maybe if you have any, do you have any plans to maintain that relationship while maintaining your independence as well?
Well, I guess that is a pretty difficult question, but I think just to make sure that, like I said before, to make sure that to maintain a good and working relationship with council, I just plan to be transparent about all of my work to you all, and to make sure that everyone in USAC is in the loop about what election board is doing. I think that's one way to keep a great relationship. But I do understand the crossover that can happen during the election season when council members may get investigated for election violations. And I think despite that, I still fully believe that it's possible to maintain a good working relationship, because what eBoard does is mainly about election work, and the only way we can make sure that we achieve the best possible outcomes for everyone is to work together. So I think when it comes to like the crossfire, when it comes to just like the overlap between election board and council members during the election season, I think it's very important to first realize that it's not like we're just doing our duty. We're just investigating where we should be. We're just having to do our job where we need to be doing. So I don't really see that interfering with like my relationship with any one of you. But I do want to make it clear that if council members were involved in an election violation, then it is the elections board duty to investigate it and making sure that it's carefully resolved.
Awesome. Christina, are you good? Cool. Okay. Wait, Bacher, is that an old hand? I think so. We'll go with Aiden.
Yeah, I just had some questions come to mind from the other questions of my fellow council members. Similarly along the line of questioning from Naomi around the things that we saw, online spread. I think a lot of those things that we're seeing nationally with regard to the, misinformation being able to spread so much more rampantly in an online only environment. I mean, I recall different posts made about the referenda and the candidates on the ballot in spring that were falsehoods or malicious, but got thousands of views from different students and reshares before any kinds of other information was able to come out. So I mean, we've talked about your plans to try and work with the moderators of Reddit to put together some sort of kind of election regulation on that platform. But in the absence of that, I guess one of the only things that comes to mind to counter that kind of misinformation is really empowering our trusted institutions at UCLA, like our election board, like Daily Bruin, like our UCLA platforms, to really carry much more well vetted information and coming out against that kind of misinformation. So if there are, instances of misinformation or falsehoods or malicious or racist things, that were to go viral during this next election cycle, like they did in the last, how would you empower election board, Daily Brew, and other kind of credible institutions at UCLA to kind of fight back with their speech against that?
I think, uh, I think to address that, like one thing we can definitely do is to have a new e-code edition that specifically addresses misinformation, because I do, like, when I was dealing with a lot of cases of misinformation during the election season, the election code somehow didn't have any provisions that gave the election board chair any authority to interfere in cases of false information unless it like introduced a severe threat to campus climate or safety. So I think definitely adding more language in the e-code that gives the election board chair more authority to deal with cases of misinformation, to hold students accountable, is definitely one thing that I'm hoping to look towards. And definitely, like deep fakes are something that are terrible, but they can't really be prevented. So in the case that a lot of fake information occurs online, the only thing we can do is, one, do outreach on our own ends from the Daily Bruin, from the election board, from USAC, to make sure that, like speech like this is not supposed to be tolerated, and that there should be the safest possible election climate for everyone. I think if we do outreach during this time, I think that's very important, and we can fight together, and definitely to give the election board chair more authority in dealing with false information.
Okay, thank you. That's really good to hear. And then my one minor other question is the hashtags. Do they need to stay? They're a lot. Is there still a utility in an online only election where that's the only kind of campaigning that candidates can engage in?
Yeah, so for the election code changes, for the social media guideline changes, I'm definitely thinking of simplifying the hashtags so that it's easier to include them. And the second thing that I was also thinking about was to shift more of the responsibility on the candidates themselves following the regulations, because what it appeared to be the case was, even though 60% of the complaints that we got were about hashtags, 80% of these hashtags complaint alone, they were about your supporters throughout the election season, about your supporters not following hashtags. So I think that relaxing the rules on definitely reposting, resharing the actions done by our supporters is something that I'm looking into. But yeah, like hashtags were a huge problem, and the election board itself, like definitely agrees with all of you, because we didn't want to be dealing with a lot of frivolous complaints. We didn't find it appropriate to issue hours-long sanctions for a missed hashtag. So I think if the social media guidelines shift more responsibility on the candidates instead of the supporters, I think, especially just on the hashtags portion, I think that will be a good fix, because in that way, candidates would still be held accountable for their behavior and that of their supporters, but more on things that actually matter. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much.
Great. So Emily and then Joan.
Hey, Alfred, thanks for coming out tonight. So my question is kind of inspired by Quinn's public comment. So I was wondering, so USAC passed a resolution a couple months ago holding ourselves to accessibility standards in our use of social media, such as like attending facts like accessibility trainings and implementing like contrast. Sorry, I had to let someone into the waiting room. Implementing like guidelines for contrast and like things like that. I was wondering what you think about possibly adding this to the social media guidelines.
Adding, do you mean adding
like
about
standards for online accessibility?
Do you mean like adding this? Sorry, like I didn't quite understand your question. Like, did you mean adding the standards of FAC to the social media guidelines?
Oh no, yeah, well, I meant like maybe possibly encouraging candidates to adhere to accessibility guidelines for their social media posts, especially as a lot of this election will probably be online as well.
I think that's I think.
Yes. Quinn just messaged me with graphics and the color contrast within them to be accessible to people with low vision.
Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Oh, was that a question? No, it was just, okay.
Oh, I just wanted to know his thoughts, but he said he'll keep them in mind. So
Okay, great, cool. John?
Yes, we seem to have a controversy every election for the past few years and quite possibly longer. Since I think that's at least partially due to the public not fully trusting eBoard and its rulings. How do you plan to address this distrust?
I think for this one, the reason why the public didn't have a trust of eBoard in the past years was because the eBoard was not transparent with their investigations of whatever complaints that were submitted against candidates. And like in the year before this, the public didn't know like the outcomes of investigations. The investigations themselves set one paper saying like this is valid, this is not valid, and then there's a sanction. But then like what we did last year was we definitely we expanded the transparency of the investigations process by making sure we post public notices of findings, and within these notices of findings themselves we made sure to thoroughly and transparently explain our thought process, and it's out there for everyone to scrutinize. So I think the way to deal with this situation is to make sure that we're just being transparent with whatever we're doing, and that we are laying out the reasons, that we're laying out our line of thought for everyone to see and everyone to criticize if they are not happy with it. I think that would be the best way to increase the trust in eBoard.
Okay, then thank you for that. The public notices of finding were indeed very helpful. It's just that we still had a controversy last time anyways.
Were yeah, like were you talking about I mean, which particular controversy were you talking about?
Well, in general, there seemed to be like still quite a bit of distrust about eBoard, and I had to explain several times that eBoard is indeed independent.
Well, I mean, like in an election year, I feel like there are always going to be controversies because there are candidates running against each other, like they're pitted up against each other, and one is always trying to win over the other. So I I don't think like controversies itself is ever going to go away for eBoard, and just the amount of criticism that it gets, because like throughout this entire controversy in an online election year, and or in any election year, the e-board has to navigate through all of these issues, and we are always trying our best to provide to impartially resolve these controversies. We made sure to lay out our line of reasoning very clearly in the notice of findings and the decisions that we took. So I think regardless of whether we do that or not, there are always going to be controversies because it's an election, and it's just something that we have to deal with all the time. It's just something that the election board has to deal with all the time. So I think just for the matter of controversy, it's just very important that election board is very transparent about everything it does, especially in regards to investigations. I think that would increase the trust in the e-board. But I do get like the sentiments people feel when they're not happy about e-board decisions. But we did lay out our reasons very thoroughly and very carefully and very transparently in all of our notice of findings.
Okay, then. Thank you. That's a good answer.
Great. So I have one more question, and it was from Quinn, just to make sure that her voice is elevated in this conversation too. And we just wanted to know, how will you go about making the debates, which are broadcasted online, or at least they were last year, accessible, especially to students who are deaf/hard of hearing? The debates last year were not captioned and did not have an ASL interpreter.
I think to make the online climate much more accessible, I think I would definitely think about hiring an ASL interpreter this year, because I do acknowledge and admit to all of you that last year's elections debates and just the forums and just the platforms, they were not as accessible for disabled people. And I do understand that Quinn and Emily and a lot of people have brought up disability issues. And I think looking forward, I think to solve these issues is to make sure I work with FAC to make sure that I whatever event that I'm holding is adhering to the standards of accessibility for disabled students. I think and I think yes, like hiring an ASL interpreter to make sure that deaf students are also able to hear and include captions. And also include captions to make sure that they can all follow along. So I think these are a lot of the options that I'm thinking of. But I do hear every and one and all of you about accessibility concerns, because of that, I think I would try to uphold I would introduce disability standards and just have maybe even create a portion on eBoard that's dedicated to providing accessibility towards disabled students, because the eBoard doesn't really have didn't have like a subcommittee for accessibility. I think maybe working with my eBoard to make sure that we are figuring out accessibility solutions for disabled students is something that I want to focus more on this year. But I definitely hear Quinn's comment. I'm not going to ignore it.
Great. Is there any more questions? Okay.
I did send a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Way before. Yeah.
Yeah, you had said in this case, how will you define the line between supporters and campaign staff / members? Was this in regards to?
It was for the shifting responsibility, the part.
Yeah, Bakur, for that, what I was saying was shifting more responsibilities on the candidates themselves adhering to the hashtags. I think that was the answer I was giving to Aiden. The line between supporters and campaign staff has always been explicitly defined in the election code, but that line wouldn't change. But what I was talking more on the lines was that like it would be more on the candidates themselves having to adhere to the social media guidelines, to include the hashtags, to include disclaimers, and less on the side of the supporters, because I do want your supporters to be able to actually, like advertise and to campaign for you without being always hamstringed by these technical regulations. But the accountability part is still the same. It's just less of the technical hashtags that's needed to campaign.
Beautiful. Does anybody else have any more questions? Okay. Seeing as there's no more questions, Alfred, feel free to give your 1-minute closing.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for your questions, and I hope I was able to, provide more clarity for them. I heard a lot of accessibility and a lot of concerns about disabled students, and that's something that I will take into a lot of consideration when planning a lot of events and a lot of documents for this year, for this ongoing year. And this really did open my eyes more to, what more I can do as an election board chair. I do. That being said, I believe I'm well qualified for the elections board chair, because I did work very hard and very long hours last year to learn what a functional election board looks like, and I believe I can continue carrying on the election board's work for the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. I also wanted to give this space to Navi and give them the chance to maybe even speak on behalf of Alfred for like 2 minutes and, give us your recommendation of what you, or at least your opinion of Alfred. I'm trying to like figure out how to say that in like a nice way. But yeah, if you could talk to him.
Yeah, sure. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay, kind of to talk about Alfred. I think it was pretty well known that prior to last year, we had an extremely dysfunctional election board. And last year we had to put in a lot of time, energy, and effort, which, I mean, all of you were candidates, and I hope that you saw we put in a lot of time and energy into making the elections run as smoothly as we could while facing unprecedented circumstances. All I can say is like Alfred was a huge part in making sure that in a huge part in making sure that the election ran as smoothly as it did. We had a record, if not, I think Chris, who's our sole advisor, mentioned we had the most complaints ever filed within like 24 hours and over the course of the election. And as the investigations director, he had to primarily deal with those. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of credit that has to be given to Alfred for his work last year. But just more than that, I think now that we know what I believe Alfred was the only person on my board last year that applied for the position. And just based on that itself, that's a huge asset to him because he knows what a functional election board looks like. Other than that, I know he's going to work his ass off for the role. And I really have no qualms to recommend him for this role. And I think this year's council is going to be just doing a disservice for themselves and the entire student body if they don't vote for someone as qualified as Alfred for the election board chair role.
Thank you for that strong recommendation, Navi. Great. Do any other council members have anything they want to say, or should we hear from Ark? You can go first.
Hi, everyone. So ARC voted 3-0 to give a positive recommendation for Alfred. I think he demonstrated exactly why today during council, but I'll go into it. I think that he was very thoughtful and intentional in his answers and his evaluation of the last election and how he plans to make this one better. And we were impressed by his qualifications in terms of his experience on eBoard last year and his leadership experience within the Burmese Student Association. And one of my concerns and something that I asked was that if he has the capacity this year. As we all know, Navi worked incredibly long hours during the election last year. But Alfred was able to tell me that he, worked this like very similar hours as investigations chair, and that he doesn't have too much on his plate and is able to commit time and energy to the position. So excited to hopefully have you as eBoard chair tonight.
Anybody else for Mark?
Yeah, Alfred, we were super impressed with your qualifications and your skills. One thing that I really appreciated from you and, anyone who's interviewing is asking questions at the end on how you can improve. And I think that was something that I really appreciated, is that you asked us, what did we see that we would like to improve on in the future? And I really appreciated that because, as you know, a lot of us faced harassment during this last election year. And I really appreciated you taking the time to really listen to us and see what you can do to help us and really make the next election year a little bit less hectic and less toxic. And so I really appreciated you for that.
Yeah, and additionally, Alfred, one thing that I did want to share with everyone is that when asked about how you'll ensure a safe environment, Alfred did mention that he wanted to take suggestions and feedback from candidates, their needs, how to better support them to ensure that they're feeling safe. And I think that's going to be something very important for the elections board chairs to take the suggestions and the advice from candidates themselves who may be going through harassment at a difficult time. And so we're very impressed with you, Alfred.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any comments? Go ahead.
Just a quick thing. So unapologetically, I'm gonna say that I'm always happy seeing like more international students getting engaged. So yeah, and I'm so proud. So yes.
Yeah, I also just want to say too, I think Alfred, especially being one of the candidates who was harassed, did a really great job in assuring me and really helping any way that he could. I knew that a lot of those circumstances were out of his control, but it felt comforting knowing that he was working diligently to try to protect, my mental health. So I really appreciate that. And I think that I think he's going to be an excellent eBoard chair too, if he takes anything from Navi, because Navi, like, I don't know how you did it, Navi. You were phenomenal. The way that you worked and the board that you were able to put together and really change our voter turnout and even our eBoard page too, because I don't know if a lot of you know, our eBoard page was hijacked twice So yeah, twice. The second time is a funny story too, but I think it's been a really great turnaround, and I hope to see that. I really hope it goes the same way this year, and I think it will with Alfred. Anybody else? If there's no comments, anyone can make a motion.
I motion to appoint Alfred to be the election chair. Is that correct?
Yes.
Please. Yeah. Okay.
Second.
Bacher motions, Aiden seconds. Let me just skip it. Okay. IVP?
Yes.
EVP?
Yes.
Gen Rep 1? Gen
Yes.
Rep, Gen Rep 2?
Yes.
Gen Rep 3?
Yes.
FSC?
Yes.
SWC?
Yes.
TSR?
Yes.
ISR?
Yes.
Great. By a vote of 9 to 0, the motion passes, and Alfred 10 is appointed to be the next election board chair. Congratulations, Alfred. Awesome. So that's it for the night. Oh, I guess. No, that's it. Yeah, that's it for the night. I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 6:13. That's a first.